Hi, everybody. As usual, I am Mike Monteforte. Thanks for tuning in to our podcast today. My guest today is a friend and colleague of mine. It's Mr. John Berkowitz. He is the director of Western Mass Death with Dignity. That's a nonprofit corp. John and I have been conversing by email over the last couple of weeks regarding the work that the company does, that John is the director of. It's something that I'm passionate about, something that clients of mine know already if they ever read any of my stuff, because I've written about this topic before, but it's important to me. And I think that the work that John does is so important. So I wanted to have him on today to tell a little bit more about what he does and other ways that we can support this very important issue. So John, thank you so much again for doing this today. If you wouldn't mind just giving a little bit of information about who you are, what you do, a little bit about your organization, that would be awesome.
Sure. Glad to be here, Mike. Thank you. And everybody else who may be watching and listening. Yeah, John Berkowitz. I live in Northampton out in Western Mass near Springfield, Holyoke. I'm about to turn 74. And in the last few years, I have obviously, when you get to be around this age, you begin to think about end of life choices and what happens if I was sick, seriously sick, what even about a terminal illness. There have been people that I've known. There are people in many of our lives, who experience that, whether it's in the 70s or 60s or 80s or 90s. So I began to think about it a lot, and I came across this movement. I call it a movement because it's not new, not from Massachusetts. It's been around for 30 years, even more, called Death with Dignity. Some people call it medical or compassionate aid in dying. The first law passed in Oregon 23 years ago, and then Washington 11 years ago, and then Vermont 7 years ago, and other states, a total of 9 states, have passed these death with dignity laws or medical aid in dying laws. And if Massachusetts did so, we'd be the 10th state, and plus Washington, D.C., which is not a state, but they did also. So this is not new. It's actually been tried and tested, and people have made this choice. I will emphasize it's a choice. It's an option. No one is mandated to take this option at the end of life. No doctor is mandated to advise or counsel or prescribe medication to a patient. It's totally optional. If it accords with somebody's wishes, with their ethical beliefs, with their religious beliefs, whatever, it's an option. And that's why the bill in Massachusetts is called the End of Life Options Act.
And that makes sense. And when I've kind of written or talked about this issue in the past as well, I look at it the same way where all we're talking about here is an option. We're not talking about forcing anything on anybody or making somebody do anything that they don't want to do. We're just talking about the ability to have this choice. And when I think about it, for myself, if I were in that situation and I had a terminal diagnosis, I would want the choice to be able to discuss, with my family, with my wife, with my kids, and my religious beliefs. I'm Catholic, and I have conversations with God every day, and I would want that choice to be between me, my family, and my God. And I don't feel like anybody else is in a better position than me to decide the way I'm going to end my life, and whether there's anybody else that should be making that choice but me. So I feel strongly about it. And at the same time, I'm not pushing anything on anybody. If you don't want to do it, if that's not the option that you would want to choose, whether it doesn't coincide with your own beliefs, religious beliefs, your dealings with your family, then that's fine. All we're talking about here is the ability to have the choice. John, have you, in your experience, because I've heard rumblings about this here and there in my business, of people actually uprooting someone that gets a diagnosis like this and knows that we don't right now have the legislation in Massachusetts, and actually moving to, states where they do have the legislation in order to be able to have this choice?
Sure, I will address that question. It's a good one, Mike. I wonder if I could just back it up just make it really clear to people watching and listening what this option is.
Yes.
I'll tell a story about it, which is one of the central stories. Every movement, every change that we're trying to create is all about human stories and human experiences. So the guy that's been the champion of this law, trying to pass this law for 12 or 13 years, Representative Louis Kafka, he's from Stoughton down southwest of Boston. And he actually just retired. And I'm sad to say that the legislature didn't pass it after all the work he's put in. But that's why we're hoping to do it this year, even though he's retired. It would be a great retirement gift. So why did he get excited? Why is he so passionate and committed to passing this law? Because as he tells the story, in 2007, I believe, one of his best friends, a guy named Al, had pancreatic cancer. That's one of the more difficult forms of cancer that can be particularly difficult, and pain and suffering at the end that just cannot seem to be fully controlled or relieved. And his friend said, "This is too much. I'm ready to go. Can you help me?" And I mean, Representative Kafka is not a doctor,
Sure.
but he could not tell a doctor or ask a doctor on behalf of his friend, to help him with medication. He was ready to go. The suffering was too much for himself, for his family around. And he said when he died, and it was not easy to witness, to be part of, to see, but he said, "I'm going to fight for this law so that nobody after you has to go through what you've gone through."
Sure.
So that's the basic story of end of life pain and suffering, that in spite of the best efforts of hospice and palliative care, and they have come a long way, they do great work, they can keep a lot of people comfortable. I would even say the majority. But there's all too many, still a significant minority of people with terminal illness, cancer, heart disease, whatever it is, who the best efforts of hospice and palliative care just don't work in that particular case. And it makes for a pretty difficult end of life for the patient, for their family and loved ones around.
Absolutely. And you're right about that. Keeping a patient comfortable is something that we see, and it happens. But there are times where it just doesn't work. Just for me, as an example, I'm allergic to many pain medications, things like Vicodins and Percocets and that sort of thing. I can't take any of that stuff. So, when I had my wisdom teeth pulled, it was a nightmare because I couldn't take any pain medication, and I have an allergic reaction. So, when I'm thinking about this, for myself, I could certainly be one of those people that I'm just not able to take some of these things that they provide to, help keep you comfortable, and, end up having to live with this pain that they can't do anything about. And, part of that's the part of it where, for me, really looking at this and thinking about, again, my life and my family's, and the way that I would want to go, and kind of being able to go on my own terms, and have the choice to do this is really important to me. The other thing, and John, maybe you can speak to this, is that this isn't a simple, if this legislation comes about and, now this becomes a law that we've got this option, this isn't something that, a patient can just snap their fingers and have when they're having a bad day. There's a process to this, right?
Exactly. And the process is actually called safeguards. Nobody wants, somebody who is severely depressed or having a difficult life, whatever it might be, just to say, "I'm done, I want out." That's not the purpose of this law, and it may not even right to say people should be able to do that. The very specific purpose is you cannot qualify, you cannot receive medication prescribed by your doctor from a pharmacy. This is actually how it works. If you qualify, if you are terminally ill, if two different doctors 2 weeks apart confirm that you are terminally ill with 6 months or less to live, then you can get a prescription prescribed by your doctor of medication. You can get it from the pharmacy. You have it in your medicine cabinet. And if the progression of your illness results in pain and suffering, severe, sometimes people call it unbearable. It's hard for me to imagine, using that word. I've never experienced that. But an awful lot of people who have survived, people who have died, have said, that's sure what it looked like and what my loved one was experiencing. So if you have that medication and things are getting really too hard at the end, 2 weeks left to live, 1 week, 1 month, whatever, the pain could be long-term during those last 6 months. You have the opportunity to self-administer, meaning it's just medication in a glass of water. You could take it, and in 3 minutes, you're in a coma, and in anywhere from 20 minutes to 2, 3, 4 hours, you're asleep, and you achieve a peaceful and painless death. And that's what the option is. I might even say that in the states that have had this, Vermont, 7 years, almost 8, Oregon, Washington, a full, let's say in Oregon, about 230 people qualify every year. It's not a lot of people that even are aware of this option or even choose to access it. But of the 230 of a year that do, only about 140 of them, 2/3, actually end up taking it. 1/3 of the people have the medication, but they never take it. And the family members that have reported about this afterwards say, that's because my loved one felt such a sense of control over the process, such a sense of assurance and security, that they're not going to have to face unrelieved, severe pain at the end. It just gave them that sense of self-determination, control over their end of life, the final decision of their lives, but they made it a comfortable one, not one of extreme suffering.
Right. And I mean, and that's, in my opinion, I mean, that's an amazing gift for somebody to have, especially with, older folks. So, I practiced in elder law. I'm dealing with seniors, day in and day out. And one of the hardest things for seniors, especially, as they get older and it becomes more difficult for them to move around and without the help of others and having to depend on other people, is this sense of losing some of that control or some of that independence. And when we're talking about something like a terminal diagnosis, again, that's got to feel out of control, and to be able to give them some semblance of that control back, where it can give that peace of mind. I mean, I feel like, for me, I think that's a great gift to be able to give someone. And if they didn't end up using it, but having it there made things easier for them, that's amazing.
Exactly. And just to go back to answer your question, it's true. One of the best known examples of this, and by the way, this is not just for the benefit of older, elderly people.
Yeah.
I was going to say like ourselves, but you don't qualify. I do. But younger people get cancer, unfortunately. We all know that. And one of the poster woman, the poster boy, the poster girl, the poster woman of this movement was a woman who was 29 when she got a sudden diagnosis of brain cancer, a very aggressive one. Her name was Brittany Maynard. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of her, but she was in California, just married, got this diagnosis. Oh my God, and she did her research, didn't take long, and she said, I can see where this is going. This is going to be really difficult on me, my new husband, my family. In the 5th month, the 4th month, the 6th month, after it just gets so difficult, hard, painful, she said, nuh-uh. Well, California didn't have a law allowing this medical aid in dying option. She said, I'm not going that way. I want to control. I want to go out in the best way possible, and then I will go out without pain and severe suffering. She moves to Oregon with a new husband. That's not easy. Uprooting, finding an apartment or buy a home, whatever. But she did, and she got a doctor there, prescribed, got the medication, and she lived her life fully for 3 months. There's all kinds of videos of her, and she took her story to the national media, People Magazine, USA Today, I forget where else. So that's why she became really well known and famous for her decision. It's a very moving story. Well, guess what? 9 months later, the California legislature passed the bill. That's almost 5 years ago. Yeah.
And I read her story as well, so I'm familiar with it, and I read about that, and again, thinking about, you know, my own life, and kind of how I would want to go out, and feeling like I would want to go out on my own terms. And you know, I have two children. I have a 17-year-old daughter and a 15-year-old son, and I think about, you know, do I want their last memories of me to be in unbearable pain? And, you know, again, being able to have some control over that for me to make sure that that doesn't happen, is part of the reason why I'm passionate about this, and why I think it's important. So I feel like in lots of ways here in Massachusetts, we're ahead of the curve with many different laws, the way that we are, you know, probate system works and things like that. We're in the forefront of a lot of these things, but on this issue, I feel like we're way behind, you know, embarrassingly behind it, in my opinion. We've got other states that are doing this. They have the safeguards in place to make sure that this isn't happening on a whim, that there is a process here to make sure that this is only given to, you know, in the right circumstances, the right situation. And I feel like, you know, we need to catch up. So, you know, here we are at the beginning of a new year, the start of 2021. I know there was a push in 2020, but, you know, whether or not it's a result of COVID, but lots of things went by the wayside, you know, when that happened.
Sure did.
And so, you know, legislators are dealing with that and putting some of these other things on the shelf. Where do we stand now as far as, you know, getting this thing to where it's approved, and where people can have this option? Where do we go with the law?
Yeah, you know, I mean, this is a campaign, like any good law, like any movement, any good thing in the world. It takes a while in a democracy. You know, it's messy. It takes a while. You have to build and build and build more and more support, and then you reach a critical mass, and the legislature and the governor, oh yeah, this is what the people want. Well, one example of that is the Boston Globe conducted an opinion poll. It was actually in the fall of 2019, but they didn't release it until just last fall. But lo and behold, they released this poll. They did it with a university, Suffolk University in Boston. And they asked a bunch of questions about people's end of life wishes and thoughts and opinions about things. One of them was, would you support Massachusetts passing a medical aid in dying law, giving a terminally ill person the option, you know, like we're talking about? Guess what? 70% of the public said, I support legalizing death with dignity and allowing this option, just like these 9 other states and Washington, D.C. So that happened last year. That came after the bill. Remember, I said Representative Kafka, the champion of this bill, he's been introducing it and fighting for it since 2011, I believe. That bill reached the Public Health Committee and passed the Public Health Committee last May. That was big. They vetted it. They even changed some of the language. They didn't weaken it, but they strengthened it. It passed. And unfortunately, given the COVID crisis, it just could not fit in and be brought up. I mean, the legislature was hard pressed just to pass a budget, you know, 5 months late, much less a police reform bill or a climate energy, you know, everything. So it wasn't surprising that it didn't make it through I mean, we were hoping maybe right up until January 5th, maybe they could squeak it through, and we did all we could. Well, it didn't. So here we are back again. You have to start from scratch. You have to introduce the bill. Kafka retired, but another representative from the Worcester area, James O'Day, very committed to this issue. He's the new lead sponsor. He's going to reintroduce the bill maybe later this week, maybe early next week. And the process begins again. But we really feel like with that poll that I mentioned, with the Public Health Committee having passed it, I'll mention one other important factor. The Boston Globe also wrote an editorial on December 6th calling for passage of this bill. They endorsed it. They said, it's time. Massachusetts citizens should have this right and this option. So that was big. So we're trying to build on the success. We didn't quite get there in 2020, but let's get it done in 21.
Right. And had 2020 not been overtaken by COVID, then, we may well have been having a very different conversation right now. So, in my opinion, and as I mentioned, personally, I'm in great support of this. And this is part of why I wanted to have you come on, is because I think that, lots of, my clients, the folks that, have to listen to me talk all the time, would be in agreement with this as well. So first of all, when I was thinking about it a couple of weeks ago and I had planned to write about it, I started, as most people do, with a good old Google search to try and get a sense of, where I could find some information, which eventually landed me on your website. And there's lots of information there. So, John, if people are looking, first of all, before even getting to the point of taking action, but they're looking to find out more, a little bit more information about, the details of the process or that sort of thing. I know, your website is a good resource for that. If you want to give your web address or any other, resources for people to, be able to find out more, I think that would be helpful.
Sure, that's easy. Our organization is Western Massachusetts Death with Dignity, and the website is westernmassachusettsdeathwithdignity.org. You can find it very easily. Then there's two national organizations called Death with Dignity National Center. They're based in Oregon. They have a good website. And then there's another national organization called Compassion and Choices, very good organization. We collaborate with them. They are kind of like our colleagues in Massachusetts trying to get this bill passed. There's two grassroots statewide organizations, Compassion and Choices, Death with Dignity, Western Mass Death with Dignity. So any of those websites. And I'd be happy just to talk on the phone with anybody who really wanted to, get involved or find out more.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And for anybody that wants to kind of reach out and see these resources, they're there. Or if you want to read the Boston Globe editorial, with the magic of the internet, we can find and read this stuff, which is fantastic. And being able to have access to that information which is what led me to you, so that we could have this conversation. And okay. We go through, we look, we find out information, we realize, hey, I'm in support of this. And like you said, there's a process to, with the legislature to bringing this about and steps to take. And that can seem daunting to people. And, folks might say, well, yeah, that's a good idea, but, I'm going to leave that to somebody else to deal with. I don't have, time or the energy or the to kind of get involved with helping keeping that ball rolling. But as you and I had talked about in our emails over the past couple of weeks, it's really not all that hard or time consuming. So how does somebody that wants to get involved and wants to support this, how do they do it?
Sure. I would just say get in touch with me, with us, with our organization, but through the website or the phone or the email. It's all on the website. And I'll just give an example. In order to get this bill passed this year, the very first step is the bill gets introduced next week or later this week. And guess what? You have to get co-sponsors on it to show that it's got legitimacy, that it's got support in the legislature. Last year's bill had 66. That's about 1/3 of the entire legislature. Well, we'd like to have 76 or 86 or 106 this year. The support has grown. The Globe didn't editorialize in support of it a year ago. They did in December. They've just been vetting the issue themselves. Well, anyway, so like for instance, people around Woburn, your area, we met a year ago with the Representative Richard Haggerty, I believe is his name. He seemed very supportive, but he was not a co-sponsor of the bill. I think it was actually too late for him to actually sign on, but he said, if this came up, I'd vote for it. That's great. But it's a new year and a new bill. It's the same bill, the language, it's just a new opportunity to pass it. I just want to encourage, let's say the people who are watching this from your district or Woburn area, get in touch with Haggerty. We can tell you how to do that. Here's a sample message. I mean, it's two sentences. It's not like 2 pages, that you have to memorize or get comfortable with, and you can just read it or email it. And ask him to be a co-sponsor of this bill, to walk the talk. I'm not saying I distrust that he's not going to support it. He said he would, but we also have to hold people accountable and get them to sponsor the bill and then kind of fight for it, and speak out. But ultimately, it's the people, it's the citizens, it's the you and the I and the people listening and watching. We have to add our voices. We have to speak out for things that we want to see changed, that are going to benefit ourselves and our loved ones or our society. We have to raise our voice.
Right. And like you said, it's rallying the legislators so that they know, hey, this is what the people want. And something like, that Suffolk poll, and Suffolk is where I attended law school. So, seeing something like that, or the Globe editorial, those are great. But, the legislators, they're busy like all of us. They want to respond to issues that are important to people, and reaching out to them to show your support for this is something that it's important, but it's easy. So, I mean, I did send an email out already, and John's website, your website has samples. Like you said, it's a couple of sentences. You don't have to sit down and crank out 2 pages. There are samples there that you can use. It was simple. It took me, about 5 minutes to review the email and send it off. And it was not something that involved any heavy lifting. It's simple to do. And, we all send 100 emails a day. So for people that are in favor of this and want to see it pass, you're already sending 100 emails a day, send 101. It's a simple one you've done the work. The information, what to say, it's there. You don't have to be some great poet to write one of these things and send it out. I did it, and I'm encouraging my clients, anybody that's in support of this, to do it. And you guys are available if people have questions and want to talk.
And I'll say one more thing. And especially for people of my generation and older, email. I mean, if you're watching or listening, you obviously have a computer and can listen to a podcast. But even so, sometimes people feel like, oh, I don't know which button to push. Your email is complicated, But the good old fashioned telephone, it turns out. And by the way, it's not with a cord, even though there are a few of those left, But sure. But I want to urge people, if you don't feel comfortable with, in some ways, they even say legislators respond even better if they get a phone call than to an email. And a phone call doesn't mean you're going to talk to your legislator. They're busy. They have a staff to field the calls. Usually it's just one staff person, unless you're the Speaker of the House with a bunch. But that's that staffer, and you're probably going to get a voice message system. You're not even going to get the staff. They're going to say, please leave a message for Representative Richard Haggerty when you hear the beep, and then you just say, I am John Berkowitz. I'm from Woburn, and I really care about this bill and this issue because I had a loved one who I saw die a difficult death. It was, or I heard about this, or I read about this, or I want this for myself, even if you haven't had the direct experience. But even that phone call, and even if you send the email, it's even extra effective, they say, and I believe this, if you actually leave a phone message at that legislator, because they hear the voice and they know that you haven't just typed an email, because who knows how many they're getting, as a legislator. Right. So that's an effective approach.
Yeah, I agree, and I was thinking about that as well, because I sent the email, but I'm a talker, so if I was thinking that I should call over there too, and then if I have to leave a message, fine, I'll leave a long message. But if it's possible to talk to anybody, I'm happy to express, my opinions on this and why it's important to me. But it's a simple thing to do, if you're in favor, and help build the momentum to get this through in 2021. So I just, again, John, I want to say thank you for agreeing to come on the podcast with me. I appreciate it so much. I think what you do is so important. It's so needed, in my opinion, and it's something that my heart is behind, and that I think family members of mine would be behind and that my clients would be behind. Just giving them a little bit of information about how to do it and how to support it, is a good start and a great way to go. Thank you again so much for taking the time. Your website, I know you gave it out. What about if anybody wants to call and chat with you? How do they get a hold of you?
It never hurts to repeat anything, right?
You got it.
Western Massachusetts Death with Dignity, 413-387-8439. That'll reach me.
All right, that's awesome. And my marketing staff here at the office, who's, a lot better than I am at all this computer stuff, can get some links up there as well, so that if anybody's watching, they can just click the link and go right to the website. So again, I appreciate you taking a little bit of time to talk to me about this, educating my clients about it. I appreciate it so much. I know I'm behind it and hope that this gets done in 2021. Any way that I can help, I want to continue to do that. But I appreciate you just taking a few minutes and chatting about this so we can educate, the people that listen to me all the time, have them learn about this. So thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate your support on this, Mike, and giving me the opportunity to talk to you and to talk to other people that you work with. Yeah.
All right. That's great, John. Thank you kindly. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care.